Hello friends, welcome back to my studio. I hope you're well. Yeah, I thought we'd talk today. I'd share a little bit more on my swatches of colour that I'm using. I've shown you in a previous vlog these little booklets or cards that I got through Amazon, and I've been playing around, which I think again I've showed you, on making some swatches. So I've written on that all of these colours make all of these different colors when mixed. And then I found another really good idea that I had on show during the open studios, and a lot of people responded really well, so I thought I'd share them with you as well. When you have paint, and I'll show you in this Matisse brand, this color here that they have is actual paint. When they mix up the batch of paint, they actually put a swatch of the colour of that batch on the label. The cheaper paints, like the Jo Sonja paint, this is a printed label. And as you can see there, that's the colour Jade, and that's the label has now faded, but that's the actual colour of the paint that comes out of, so that's Jade. That's the colour. So when I've got them displayed, how I've got here hanging up, any Jo Sonja paint, and I'll show you another one. This is a gorgeous colour. You can see from the top, that's the colour that's in the tube, but the label has since faded. So, and I'll show you here my paint tubes. I think I've shown you how I have this wire. I've just got some screws nailed in with some wire, and then with these little bull clips I hang the paint up. But what I've gone further and done is paint all of the tubes onto their own swatch card, and it shows me, and you can see particularly with the red, it shows me where it's really hard to remember between these reds which colour I want. I can see very quickly the shade and gradation of the red. So if I'm looking for a deeper red, I can come up here. If I'm looking for a more fire engine red, I'm here somewhere. So when you've got colours that are all very similar, like again in these teals, and also, sorry for the quick pan there, the browns, it shows me very quickly what I've got, and it also shows up the transparent colour compared to an opaque colour. So yeah, I thought I'd share that's how I've got my paints, and I've got this bigger trolley now, and the blue is a little bit hidden behind there, but same sort of thing with the blues. So if you get to a point where you've got a whole lot of paint tubes, this can be a really great way to help you easily grab and see what you're looking for. If I swing you back around to this view, this is currently how I've got my oil paints. And while I've got them sorted into, these are all the brown shades and these are all the blues, I can't see what I've got properly. And then I end up doing something like this and buying a new tube of paint where I've got a perfectly full tube of paint. So it's a double up where I could have had another colour there. These are oil paints, and this again is the Langridge. This is the actual paint out of the batch. And while that's really helpful, what ends up happening when you've used your paint for a while, you start to get quite messy where you've got paint all over your tubes and you can't really see what the colour is anymore. That's certainly how my paints end up. So I thought, I've bought a whole lot of new clips. So when I say bull clip, this is what I mean. They're a fold back clip, and so they just have the wire, they go over the wire and clip on to the paint, and then I can just put the colour swatch tucked in there as well, and then that can hang up. And I've got a really nice big, obviously that's not the swatch for this, so I'm about to do that. This gives you a really good large surface of colour to signify what paint you've got. And while we're talking about swatching, the other thing I'd like to show you today is this French blue by Jo Sonja. I really, really love this blue. French blues are generally a richer, in the other brands they're closer to an ultramarine, they're much brighter, but I really love this muted down tone of the French blue. And this is it here, dry. The problem, and I've said this before with the Jo Sonja paints, they dry a little bit darker, and I actually prefer this colour. I'll spread that out for you. The camera won't pick it up as true as what I can see it, but I prefer the colour when it's wet compared to when it's dry. So I looked up the Jo Sonja website and got the recipe, not the quantities, but what's actually makes up their French blue. And every pigment has a code, and so the codes for this Jo Sonja French blue, it'll be different for other brands French blue, but it has PB153, which is a blue-green, a blue cyanosine, and the closest I've got is this phthalo blue, so I'm going to use phthalo blue. The next number that's in it is PR101, and that is red oxide. And the last thing that's in it is PW6, which is titanium white. And I've got that there. So I'm going to, and I've got them here. This is the phthalo blue, red oxide, and some titanium white. I'm going to mix these and try and mix up my own French blue. I'm nearly out of this. Let's see how we go. Phthalo blue is very highly pigmented. Any of your phthalates are going to be highly pigmented, so you're going to need less of that than perhaps you think. So that's probably a 2 to 1, 2 parts blue, 1 part red. See how we go. And anytime you put the opposite on the colour wheel to a colour, you are going to get that colour muted down. So for a blue, the opposite on the colour wheel is orange, and so this red oxide is acting like an orange and it's muting it down. Now I'll put a little bit of titanium white in here because you'll be able to see how it's muted it down already. So if I just get a little bit of the phthalo blue and a little bit of titanium white just to show you. So can you see, I know the camera won't pick it up true, but can you see how that's muted that down just by putting a little bit of the opposite on the colour wheel? And so this applies to any of your colours. If you want to work in a muted palette, just apply a bit of the opposite colour on the colour wheel to it. They're like friends, which is why they're called complementary, not as in they complement, are nice to each other. That it's complement in the way that it completes the colour wheel is the way to think of complementary. It's a way of completing the colour wheel, and that's how you get muted colours. So we're not quite there. I think we need to take a little bit more blue. And a little bit more white. See, adding a little bit more red, it's muted that blue down again, so that doesn't look as muted now that I've added that little bit more. What do we need? Let's have a look here. I put it against our colour swatch. It's looking a little green. It's not showing up on the camera true to what I can see. I think we need to go back towards the blue a little bit with that. So let's do that. Even if you get this wrong, it's a really great exercise to play around with your paint in this way and just see what colours you've got, rather than trying to collect every tube available by a paint company, is to play around and see what colours you can make from your tubes. That's good. And see, we've gone a little bit more, less muted, a little bit more towards the blue. And my apologies to anyone who's watching this who knows how to mix this colour and yelling at me through the telly right now. Okay, that's quite blue. We'll just go in with a bit of white. Because you can always add more paint colour, but you can't take it out. So it is a little bit trial and error. And then once you do get a colour that you like, make sure you swatch it up, and then you've got a nice big piece of colour that you can match to. Definitely use a spatula to mix your paint and not a paintbrush, because you'll get all of the different colours caught in the bristles, and you will find it doesn't blend as well as when you're using a blade. Quite close to the blue that I do like. It's going to be the saturation's good. Okay, that was about as exciting as watching paint dry, so I've just decided to skip forward until I got the mix right. I don't know if you can see here, but the mix was still, this is what we're aiming for, and the mix still had this little bit of green tending towards more of a turquoise than blue, and the red oxide wasn't pulling it out of the green range enough. So of course the opposite to green on the colour wheel is red. So I've ended up putting a fair bit of this quinacridone red into the mix, and we've come up with this here, and we'll just do a swatch, pick up some of this. So there's my mix. It's showing up more blue on the camera than muted in person. And actually, I'll just move this out of the way. And we'll put a little bit of the Jo Sonja paint next to it. And there we go, pretty close. So while the Jo Sonja website told me that it had a blue, green, a red oxide and titanium white, that was giving me more of these aqua tones. And so then when I've brought it up to adding some red to take this green out, I was able to get very, very close. I'm really happy with that. And I'll be interested to see when they dry how much I lose out of that colour. So on their wet, they are the same. Let's just dry it off. And so they're dry, and we'll put a little bit of our mix. It has darkened a little bit. But not as much as the Jo Sonja. See, this goes quite, oh, I don't know whether the camera's picking it up. This goes quite chalky, and that stayed more gloss and closer to it is wet than the wet to dry of Jo Sonja, which was the whole point of the exercise. Whew, I got so hot standing under the light doing that. So there's my swatch of my French blue and my little tub worth. And I'm going to get on to stretching up some wire and getting all of these oil paints out of these tubs and getting all the swatches done. So I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.